Besides flood troubles, other areas of China are facing other problems. An oil tanker collided with a cargo ship near Shanghai in East China, a poisonous gas leak inside a chemical plant in the southwest, and an accident at a giant glass-bottom slide in the northeast. China's will forward diplomats sending conciliatory messages to the U.S. and asking for U.S.-China cooperation, in stark contrast to their aggressive attitudes earlier. Chinese students who returned home after graduating overseas are now an important target for the Communist Party. Authorities are actively tracking their information. And a media company is being investigated by U.S. authorities for defrauding donors. It is linked to former Trump political advisor Steve Bannon and one of China's most wanted fugitives, Guo Wengui. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. City streets inside China's urban Chongqing municipality remained submerged in floodwater on Thursday. Nearby, the country's famous Yangtze River just endured the fifth wave of flooding to pass through the area this year. Chongqing is built on a mountainous area. Many roads and parks are located nearby the river. As a result, bridges and ports are now underwater. The local water level has nearly reached the third floors of some buildings. Roads in the city center are also flooded. On Thursday, the fifth flood wave this year arrived at the Three Gorges Dam. The reservoir's water flow reached a speed of 75,000 cubic meters per second, marking the largest flood peak the dam has encountered since its construction 17 years ago. The dam has so far opened 11 flood release holes to help discharge water downstream. An accident at a giant glass-bottom slide in northeastern China's Liaoning province caused one death and multiple injuries. But the accident isn't the first problem China has had with this kind of slide. The accident happened on Wednesday at the Huguxia scenic area. Tourists were sliding down the glass slide when a heavy downpour suddenly began. According to Chinese media, tourists on the half-mile-long slide were sliding too fast due to the heavy rainfall and bumped into each other. The cause of the accident is still under investigation. In recent years, glass-bottom slides and corridors in sightseeing places has become a trend in China, but the quality remains a problem. Since 2017, authorities have investigated glass-bottom slides in at least 6 provinces. Many of them were later ordered to close. In March of last year, all glass-bottom slides in Hebei province ceased to operate, citing renovation. According to Chinese media, in 2015, a glass-bottom corridor on Henan province's Yuntai mountain cracked after a tourist dropped his stainless steel water bottle while walking on it. Last year, a similar accident struck the Fuzilian scenic area in Guangxi province. There, a glass-bottom slide smashed through the fence, resulting in 1 death and 6 injuries. Also last year, at Qingdao City's Level 0 scenic area in Shandong province, 2 large glass panels fell off the glass-bottomed walkway. The 2 children standing on the panels nearly fell into the ocean. Besides flood troubles, other areas of the country are facing other problems. According to Chinese media reports, a poisonous gas leak inside a chemical plant in southern China's Sichuan province filled the air with a pungent, unpleasant odor Thursday morning. Video of the accident shows black fog rising from the scene. Many locals soon began to flee the city, crowding the streets as they evacuated. But the Chinese Communist Party's, or CCP's, reports about the accident appear inconsistent. Municipal authorities from Leshan City confirmed that a chemical plant leak occurred without explosions. They added that the situation is under control. But that district's official Weibo account, where the leak occurred, claimed there was no leak or explosion. That says that district's Communist Party secretary said in a video that no leaks, explosions, or any other abnormalities were found. Authorities also said the pictures and videos showing the incident are fake. They told local media that after testing, they found that no gases in the air exceeded standard levels. They rejected the claims of an explosion and announced what they called rumors spreading online. An oil tanker carrying 3,000 tons of gasoline collided with a cargo ship near Shanghai on Thursday, leaving 14 people missing. The oil tanker was burning as Coast Guard ships sprayed it with streams of water. 3 people have been rescued, 14 are missing. The cargo ship sank soon after the collision. Beijing-based scholar Xu Zhangren responded on Wednesday to an invitation from Harvard University to serve as a research scholar for 1 year at the Fairbanks Center for Chinese Studies. This after she received the notice to unemployed persons, which means she was officially fired by Tsinghua University in Beijing. She was a professor at the law school of this university. Since the outbreak of the CCP virus in China, he has published articles criticizing the Chinese Communist Party and its leader Xi Jinping, describing Communist China as becoming a lonely boat on the ocean of world civilization. Last month, he was arrested on grounds of prostitution, which he has denied. He accused the CCP of persecuting him and hired lawyers to fight for his rights. Police officers visited him the next day after he entrusted the lawyers. The police asked Xi and his lawyers not to talk to foreign media to avoid being hyped. The Fairbanks Center for Chinese Studies at Harvard University is a postgraduate research center and one of the most renowned institutions for China study. It is unknown if the CCP will let Xi out of the country. The U.S. State Department has sent a letter to U.S. colleges and universities warning them to divest from Chinese stocks in their endowments in case Chinese companies get delisted for not complying with U.S. standards.
The U.S. State Department is warning colleges and universities to divest from China stocks. Bloomberg reports that State Department Undersecretary Keith Krach sent a letter to American colleges and universities on Tuesday. He wrote it would be prudent to divest from Chinese stocks because they will likely be delisted from the U.S. exchanges by the end of next year. A Bloomberg investigation last year found that college and university funds represent billions of investment in Chinese firms. Endowments have directed growing portions of their investments into Chinese companies that U.S. politicians say threaten national security and are linked to human rights abuses. U.S. regulators recently requested that American stock exchanges set new rules that could trigger the delisting of Chinese companies. Concerns are investors are being exposed to fraud. The State Department letter also warns of China's growing influence on U.S. campuses. It says the U.S. is investigating illicit PRC funding of research, intellectual property theft, and recruitment of talent.
A media company linked to former Trump political advisor Steve Bannon and exiled Chinese businessman Guo Wengui is now being investigated by U.S. authorities. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. The company, named the GTV Media Group, raised more than $300 million in a private offering this spring. Bannon serves as a company director. Guo is described as a company advisor and is a public face for its fundraising. Investigators have been examining whether GTV Media or Guo's associates violated security laws through the private share placement. 2 American banks have frozen accounts tied to the company's fundraising. Guo was a property tycoon back in China. As a tough critic of China's Communist Party, he's one of the country's most wanted fugitives. A representative for Mr. Guo didn't give a comment, and Mr. Bannon declined to comment. China state-run Global Times published an article saying Joe Biden would be, quote, smoother to deal with than Trump. According to the article, Chinese analysts say Biden would likely restore negotiations on the Trans-Pacific Partnership or TPP agreement. The article noted how China has become a major issue in the upcoming November election. The Trump administration has taken a hardline stance towards China, particularly on trade, the virus, and human rights. One Chinese professor told the Global Times that Biden would likely place the U.S. back into the Paris Climate Agreement and the Iranian nuclear deal, which were all overturned under the Trump administration. He added Biden is, quote, definitely smoother to deal with, citing his prior experiences with China under the Obama administration. Biden has defended China for years, saying in 2011, a more prosperous China will mean more demand for American-made goods and services and more jobs back home in the United States of America. He also supported China's entry into the World Health Organization. Recently, Biden said in an interview with NPR Weekend he would slash U.S. tariffs on China. An aide later refuted the claim. Biden's ties to China has been a topic of controversy over the past years. Ahead of the November election, Joe Biden's son Hunter Biden has come increasingly under the spotlight. In particular, the Trump campaign created an almost 2-minute video delving into Hunter's ties to China, asking about Hunter Biden's dealings with China. It references an investigation by ABC News, which touched on questions about money Hunter made on foreign businesses' dealings while Joe Biden was vice president. And did Joe Biden allow it? Millions of dollars in at least 2 countries. In 2013, Hunter accompanied his father on a trip to China. Soon after that trip, BHR was launched. Hunter is a board member. While he was a director since it was founded, Hunter didn't become a shareholder until 2017, after his father's vice presidency had ended. BHR is a private equity firm funded in part by Chinese banks. According to the Wall Street Journal, Chinese entities control 80% of BHR. While Biden's lawyer said in 2019 Hunter would resign from the board, business records show that he's still on the board as of March 2020. Hunter has pledged not to serve on the board of any foreign-owned companies if his father wins the presidency. As the U.S. steps up measures to confront the Chinese regime, China's wolf warrior diplomats have been sending conciliatory messages to the U.S. and asking for U.S.-China cooperation. It's in stark contrast to their aggressive attitudes earlier.
China's wolf warrior diplomats are turning soft on America. Zhao Lijian is China's foreign ministry spokesperson, known for accusing the U.S. Army of spreading the virus to Wuhan and for calling a former U.S. official disgraceful and disgusting. But now he is sending conciliatory messages to the U.S.
We have always believed that cooperation between the U.S. and China will benefit both countries, and conflicts will hurt us both. U.S.-China confrontation is not in the interest of international society.
And he's not the only Chinese official eager to push for U.S.-Chinese cooperation lately. In a recent online speech at the Brookings Institution, Chinese Ambassador Cui Tiankai said China is now ready to work with the current U.S. administration anytime, anywhere, even today or tomorrow. State media outlet People's Daily also published a related article, saying some U.S. politicians attempt to use the so-called decoupling theory to manipulate reality and block the general trend. That is their foolish dream and wishful thinking. China's top diplomat Yang Jiechi, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, and Foreign Vice Minister Le Yucheng have all lately been extending the olive branch, the last saying he's ready to talk to Washington leaders anytime. Their current tone is in stark contrast to Chinese authorities' earlier comments, including a derogatory statement made by China's state-run media about U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
散播政治病毒的蓬佩奥正把自己变成人类公敌。
While other remarks mocked the unrest in the U.S. following George Floyd's death, China's Central Broadcast Network CCTV called it retribution for the U.S. support of Hong Kong.
弗洛伊德之死所引爆的大骚乱，就是美国政客自酿的一杯苦酒。这难道不是那些政客的报应吗？
The Chinese regime's cover-up of the virus outbreak, suppression of Hong Kong's freedom, and other human rights violations have prompted increasingly hardline actions from Washington. The Trump administration has shut down the Chinese consulate in Houston, sanctioned dozens of Chinese officials over human rights abuses, pushed to delist Chinese companies from U.S. stock markets, and issued orders to restrict Chinese social media platforms TikTok and WeChat. Analysts say the Chinese regime may have since realized its wolf warrior diplomacy has backfired and is now adjusting its strategy, but it's uncertain whether Washington is still willing to return to the negotiating table. A Pew Research poll shows that 70% of Americans now hold negative opinions about China. On Wednesday, the State Department's East Asia Bureau posted an invitation for dialogue on Twitter. The invitation was extended to members of China's legislature, the so-called People's Representatives. The U.S. Embassy in China also shared the invitation. Many Chinese netizens left comments opposing the suggestion. One netizen posted a photo of one of the People's Representatives, Shen Jilan, who recently died at 91-year-old. Shen was China's longest-serving lawmaker and was re-elected 12 times. She was nicknamed a hands-on machine by the Chinese people, for she never voted against any bill proposed by the Communist Party during her time in office. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
Chinese authorities are actively tracking overseas students who have returned to China. They're doing it through a national organization under the charge of the United Front Work Department. NTD's Juliet Song reports.
China is systematically monitoring citizens who are graduates of overseas universities, and they're doing it through an organization that appears to be a civil group, but is tightly controlled by the party. NTD obtained several internal documents from city authorities in China's central Henan province. One document says citizens who studied overseas are an important target for the party's influence operations. Another listed information of the over 300 locals who studied overseas and in great detail. It included their workplace, date of birth, whether they're a party member, any university they've attended, addresses, and contact information. These people went to schools in many different countries, including Europe, North America, and Australia. To strengthen the party's influence among this group, the local authorities even set up an association for this. The association belongs to a national organization that has close connections with Chinese citizens who hold diplomas from overseas universities. It's called the Western Return Scholars Association. For Chinese authorities, this organization is quite significant. It's directly under the charge of China's United Front Work Department. The United Front runs overt spy operations for the party. It also co-opts leaders of different groups overseas to expand the party's influence overseas. The Scholars Organization was set up over 100 years ago. On its 100th anniversary, Chinese leader Xi Jinping gave a speech. Xi asked the organization to be a bridge that connects overseas students with the party, and to unite the overseas student body around the party. Of the organization members, at least 6,000 studied in the U.S. Many of them graduated from elite schools such as Harvard and MIT. In 2016, Chinese authorities released a document. In it, it demands that the organization uphold the party's leadership and establish a database of overseas talents who return to China and find out their situation in a timely manner. The party demands that the organization lead the returned talented students to tell the China story well and strengthen their ties with international organizations while serving national strategies, including the Belt and Road Initiative. Authorities also asked the organization to set up a party branch. It said the Communist Party should play the leadership role and make sure the party's policies are executed. Reporting by Juliet Song, NTD News.
Now to Hong Kong. Media tycoon Jimmy Lai, also one of Hong Kong's most prominent democracy activists, arrived at court on Thursday to face a criminal intimidation charge related to an alleged offense 3 years ago. Lai was alleged to have threatened to injure a man during the annual Tiananmen massacre vigil in 2017. He has pleaded not guilty to the charge. President Trump expressed his support for Lai on Wednesday.
President Trump hailed Hong Kong media mogul Jimmy Lai as a brave man. The founder of Hong Kong's independent newspaper Apple Daily was recently arrested by police on foreign collusion allegations. He is a well-known supporter of democracy and critic of the Chinese communist regime.
But I feel badly for him because I hear he's a good person. I don't know him, but I hear he's a good person, obviously a very brave person.
Lai was arrested under Hong Kong's new national security law. 6 weeks ago, the Chinese Communist Party imposed the law on Hong Kong, which made even the mildest forms of activism a crime against the regime. Punishment is up to life in prison. The president sent Lai his best wishes and acknowledged that the region's freedom obviously seems to have been taken away.
Former Hong Kong legislator Liang Guo, also known as Long Hair, says an Orwellian reign of terror has descended on his city. And it's shocking to many Hong Kongers to just how quickly the change has come, including a new climate of self-censorship. Even doing an interview like this one under the national security law could mean arrest. Here's an excerpt from his conversation with American Thought Leaders host Jan Jekielek.
Do you see, you're saying we're heading gradually into an Orwellian 1984 type society. First of all, do you expect that the press freedom will be hit?
I'm not saying that Hong Kong is a totalitarian society now, but the self-censorship, if you go through the details and articles of the state security law in Hong Kong, you feel chilling. So what will you do? You will say that, should I say that or should I not say that? It's a self-censorship. Just like if I talk to you just right now, if bear in mind I said maybe something I said will make me into troubles, of course I'm concerned, and then I will try to not saying something that I think it will make me in a very, very devastated situation. Though that is the if you read the novels of George Orwell, Animal Farm or 1948, hey, Big Brother is watching you. So that is it. Compare. I think it might be a very strange feeling for the Hong Kong people when they watch the movie or read the literature, or when they watch the news that in somewhere, in some place, in some times, some of those dissidents were arrested and persecuted. But now it happened it began to happen in Hong Kong. You know what I mean? For a lot of Hong Kong people, they will never think of Jimmy like such a figure will be arrested and harassed openly. It's like a show. 200 strong policemen marching into a media group, and they search. It's a show to the whole world and Hong Kong people that they are, the Hong Kong government is really reckless and powerful. So it's just like you kill the mobs and the gangsters. They need to kill people on the street in order to threaten the people.
A new media report says Australia may block a Chinese company from buying Australian milk brands. According to the paper, the Foreign Investment Review Board supports the purchase, but the Treasurer wants to veto it.
Australia may block China Mengniu Dairy Company from buying some of the country's best-known milk brands. The Australian Financial Review reported the news Thursday, citing unidentified sources who blamed diplomatic issues. The newspaper said Treasurer Josh Frydenberg is going against the advice of the Foreign Investment Review Board, or FIRB, which was in favor of the $430 million deal. In July, Australia changed its foreign investment law for the first time in almost half a century. It gave the Treasurer last resort power on deals, even after FIRB approves them. The change was partly in response to fears the pandemic would make it easier for foreigners to buy up strategic assets. If the milk deal is blocked, it would be the first government veto since the law was changed. Diplomatic relations between Australia and China have become increasingly rocky. Earlier this week, China announced an anti-dumping probe into imports of Australian wine. Reuters reported that Chinese investment in Australia was cut by more than half in 2019. They say, according to an anonymous bank advisor, the number of deals is likely to keep falling this year because of diplomatic tensions and the virus.
And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow.